qualify something that I said this morning. I was trying to make a point that's a general point, and I probably pressed it beyond where it might have been understood as more than general. I was saying that the books of the law parts of those books give us God's law. The prophets do the preaching to the people, telling them where they've been breaking God's law and the need to repent. The historical books, I was saying, don't primarily give us the moral teaching like the prophets. They tell what the people did, the good, the bad, the ugly, the in-between and everything else, warts and all. That's not to say that the historical books don't have moral lessons and don't make moral points. Of course they certainly do. Leading up to the fall of Israel, leading up to the fall of Judah, and laying the blame for that at the apostasy and idolatry and sins of the kings and the people. So it's not that they don't make moral points, and if I left that impression, that's totally wrong. They do make moral points, but as the lives of these people are described, it does not always stop to say, and by the way, she shouldn't have done that. By the way, there shouldn't have been an idol in Michael David's house. By the way, there shouldn't have been this. By the way, oftentimes the narrative just goes through and tells what it was. All right, now tonight we're going to be looking at some parables from the Gospel of Luke. You'll recall a few weeks ago we went through and looked at some things out of the Gospel of Luke where Jesus was invited to somebody's house for dinner. And we just saw several different things that happened when Jesus was invited to somebody's house for dinner. And I suspect that it often went a little bit different than the inviter had intended. Tonight, we're going to look at the Gospel of Luke at three parables, using the term stricter and more loosely, where Jesus uses the phrase, a certain rich man. It's done three times, and the first one is going to be in Luke chapter 12. And by the way, as we're going to be using the word parable, one of these we talked about, some of us in Bible class earlier in the week. Charlotte had asked a question about one of the ones we're going to be studying about, and I thought it would be interesting to discuss some of this in further detail in the sermon. Before we begin, one of you men please tell us, what does the word parable mean?
It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning.
All right. A classic parable, that's a pretty good definition of a classic parable. An earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And a classic parable, for instance, would be the parable of the sower. The sower went out to sow. He threw seed on hard ground, birds ate it. Threw seed on rocky ground, it didn't survive. Threw seed on thorny ground, got choked out. Threw seed on good ground, it brought forth and gave fruit. Well, there's your earthly story. Then what's the heavenly meaning? Jesus goes in and he describes what those mean. What does the word parable come from? The word in Greek, what does it mean? The para is, you can think of a lot of words in English that begin with para. Paramilitary is not the military, but something kind of alongside the military. Paralegal is not the lawyer, but somebody that works alongside the lawyer. Parallel, if here's a line and you got a parallel line, it's over here. Para means beside, alongside. The BL here comes from the word in Greek bole, which is ball, like to throw. And so a parable is something you throw beside something else. Here is how people react to the word. Some people don't listen to it. Some people, eagerly accept it, but there's no root and they fade away. And you throw a story down beside that to illustrate it. So you have, you throw beside this something else to illustrate it. That's in the classic definition of a parable. But then the term is used more or less loosely. For example, look at Luke chapter 18, verse 9. That didn't work. You're going to take off your coat. You need to take that out of the coat pocket. Luke 18, verse 9, he spake this parable to certain of those who trusted in themselves that were righteous. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One's a Pharisee, one's a publican. The Pharisee prayed arrogantly, the publican prayed humbly. The publican's prayer was accepted. Is that really an earthly story with a heavenly meaning in that instance? No, it's pretty much there at one level. It's not a two-dimensional, it's one-dimensional thing. And so the term is used a little bit here and there, and you could almost stretch it really to include just, if you try to go through and catalog all the parables, you kind of have to decide where to stop, because Jesus is always giving illustrations such as he would come as what? A thief in the night. Well, that's a parable, isn't it? You know, and so it's used in different ways. The 3 parables we're going to look at tonight each vary a little bit. The first one is in Luke chapter 12. And it begins in verse 13. One out of the multitude said to him, Teacher, bid my brother divide the inheritance with me. He said unto him, Man, who made me a judge or a divider over you? And he said unto them, Take heed, keep yourself from all covetousness, for a man's life consists not in the abundance of the things which he possesses. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he reasoned within himself, saying, What shall I do, because I have not wherewith to bestow my fruits? And he said, This I will do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, be merry. But God said unto him, Thou foolish one, this night is thy soul required of thee, and the things which thou hast prepared, whose shall they be? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself, and is not rich towards God. He begins by saying, Take heed that you be not covetous. Is covetousness a serious sin? It's one of those sins. It's, of course, one of the 10 Commandments was what? Thou shalt not covet. I mean, out of 10 things that were written on those stones, that was one of them. Thou shalt not covet. In 1 Corinthians 5, where it was talking about, if any man that's named a brother be a fornicator or an idolater, and what does he also say? Or covetous. Sometimes it's hard to imagine a situation where you withdraw from a person for covetousness. Could be a little bit difficult, couldn't it? Because I could be covetous and try to put a nice face on it, couldn't I? Now, sometimes it's flagrant enough that everybody can see clearly this person is covetous. Other times we can disguise it. And we can not only disguise it to other people, we can disguise it to ourselves, can't we? Covetous is that greed, that inordinate desire for things, that resenting the things of others. And here this fellow is, Teacher, tell him to give me part of this inheritance. Jesus doesn't take that job. He's not interested in it. He says, take heed that you keep yourselves from all covetousness. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of things that he possesses. I want you to stop and think about that just for a moment. Have you seen the bumper sticker that said, he who dies with the most toys wins? You ever seen that bumper sticker? That's what a lot of people think life is about. A lot of people believe your life consists of the abundance of the things you possess. If I have a nicer suit than you, then I'm better than you. If I have a nicer office than you, I'm better than you. If I drive a newer car than you or a more prestigious make than you, then I'm better than you. If I live in a bigger house or in et cetera, et cetera. And that's important to a lot of people. You see, I heard a car commercial, I guess on the radio the other day, and they were talking about our cars are in such good condition. No one will know it's used. It's talking about their used cars. They're certified. No one will know it's used except you. And I just thought, you know, there's a lot of people out there, though, that would appeal to. You know, you get to pay the price for a used car, but still put on the airs and have people think you bought a new car. Why is that important to people? Why do people want other people to think it's a brand new car to me? Because of this idea that our life consists of the things that we possess. It doesn't. Is anything wrong with enjoying blessings that come our way? No. In Proverbs, there's going to be a couple lessons coming up in the Wednesday night class about money. One is going to be talking about not putting too much emphasis on money. The other is going to be talking about not putting enough emphasis on money. And good things can be appreciated, but it's kind of like the cherry on an ice cream sundae. You know, it's kind of nice for it to be there, but you know, if you go for the cherry and you miss the ice cream, you've really kind of missed the point of what a sundae is all about. Life is not about the little thing that gets draped across the top of it, in that instance, cherry. So, he gives the illustration of this man. And what is the sin of this man? One of you brethren, just describe what's wrong with this man. Mike? All right, the first man, yeah, I didn't make my question clear. The reason this started was because of this fellow being covetous, wanting the inheritance. And then Jesus, to answer him, tells a parable about this rich man. Now, what's wrong with the rich man?
Well, he's had so much abundance that he wants to keep it for himself instead of doing what he should do, to spread his wealth around.
He's got more than he needs, more than he can use, and yet all of his thoughts are consumed on self. I mean, just read through this and see how many times he refers to himself. He reasoned within himself, saying, "What shall I do? Because I have not where to bestow my fruits." And he said, "This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater. There will I bestow all my grain and my goods. And I will say," to who? Who's he going to have a conversation with? Yeah, the only person he's really interested in. "And I'll say to myself," you know, he's not interested in anybody else. He's not interested in God. He's not interested in God's work. He's not interested in the things of others. He's not interested in the needs of others. Self. What would you say is the typical mode of an American worker when it comes to his paycheck? By the time you get your paycheck, if you're not self-employed, the government's already deducted their various things of it. If you're self-employed, you got to send that in later. But you get your paycheck, and what do people do with it? You know what, Lucky?
I was going to say when I get mine, man, look at the taxes they took out.
Yes. Yes. It comes out. And we're told, you render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. But after the government takes its chunk out, then here's this other chunk, and you know what a typical reaction is in our society? How much of that do you spend on yourself? About 110%. Why do I say that? You know what the average credit card debt per family is, I've heard, in the United States? I've heard this. I don't know if it's accurate. $5,000. Which means for everybody that doesn't carry a credit card debt, there's some folks out there. And why do we accumulate debt? Because we're not just spending everything we have, we're spending more than we have. right? I mean, if you've got $20 in your pocket, why borrow $20? Now, I'm not talking about, something you put on your bill and then you pay it off, or the occasional, big ticket item, you need something. But it's just a common habit of people to, and then we get locked into, and this can happen easily with new converts, you're locked into a lifestyle, and it's all, taken care of. There's this, and we need to make sure that we don't have the attitude of this man. There's some times that we can be just like this man with just one difference. Our ground doesn't bring forth plentifully. I mean, would this fella have been a generous guy if the crops hadn't come in so well? No, he had a problem to begin with, doesn't he? What's his problem? That everything that comes his way, he sees about himself. And of course, the end of it is, at the end of the day, after he's decided what he's going to do, and his plan is, I will eat, drink, be merry. And I always refer to this as one of the jokes in the Bible. I don't know if there's many jokes in the Bible, but I kind of take this one as a joke, because not a non-serious joke, but there's a point of humor in it. There's a similar phrase in Isaiah, but also the Epicurean motto was, let us eat, drink, and be merry, and then there's an end to that. Let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. What did this guy say? I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. And then God delivered the punchline. Let's move on now to our next one. Luke chapter 16. Now, this is a very unusual parable. This is one that Charlotte asked about the other day. In some ways, it's one of the most difficult parables in the New Testament. And it's going to begin with a certain rich man, but the rich man is not going to be the star of the parable, is it? Let's read it. Verse 1. He said also unto the disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward. What's a steward? What do you mean? What's a steward? Okay, someone over your goods and responsible for them, takes care of that. So there's a certain rich man, and he had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he was wasting his goods. He called him, that is, the rich man called the steward, and said to him, what is this that I hear of thee? Render the account of your stewardship. You can no longer be a steward. The steward said within himself, what shall I do, seeing that my Lord takes away the stewardship from me? I have no strength to dig. To beg, I'm ashamed. I'm resolved what to do, that when I'm put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. Calling each one of his Lord's debtors, he said to the first, how much do you owe my Lord? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said, take your bond, sit down quickly, write 50. Then he said to another, how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said, take your bond, write 80 or 80. And his Lord commended the unrighteous steward because he had done wisely, or one translation says he had done shrewdly. And then Jesus' comment is, for the sons of this world are for their own generation wiser than the sons of light. Now, what's that parable about? Is this a very admirable guy? He got commended, didn't he? What was he commended for? Was he commended for being righteous? No. He was commended for being clever. He was commended for being shrewd. In what way? Well, if we'll read a verse or two more, we'll see the application Jesus makes from this parable. Then we'll back up and we'll read it again and we'll see the point. Look at the application Jesus makes of this parable. Verse 9. I say to you, make to yourselves friends by means of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when it will fail, they will receive you into eternal tabernacles. Can you see how that connects back into the story? Now, you may be reading that and saying, what does that mean? Well, we'll decipher it here as we go through. But first, just notice the points of contact. What was this steward concern? What was his concern that he was trying to take care of? He knew his job was out the window, and he was going to have no place to be. And so his main mission was what? To get a place to be received into later, right? What am I going to do? The stewardship is taken away from me. He's not trying to get back into the good graces of his master. He's trying to get somewhere else. And Jesus' comment at the end was, the sons of this world are for their own generation, or for the sons of this age are for their own generation, wiser than the sons of light. So we're going to come back to this idea here. And is this a good fellow? This is not a good person. It specifically says what in verse 8? What kind of a steward is he? He's unrighteous. But there's a point that he understood at an earthly level what Jesus is trying to get us to understand at a heavenly level. And before we go further, let's just point out this. Not every point in a parable is going to match up with something else. For example, when the Bible says that Jesus will come like a thief in the night, is it that Jesus will steal stuff from you? Because a thief will do that? No. Is it that Jesus might go to jail? Because that might happen to a thief? No. Is it that Jesus is dishonest? No. There's clearly one point of contact. What's the point of contact? It comes suddenly and without warning. Jesus said, if the fellow knew when the thief was coming, he'd be ready. The point is, he said, in a time when you think not. That's the only analogy to be drawn from the thief in the night thing. And if you go past that, it's kind of like when you eat watermelon too close to the rind. You ever done that? It's good, and you're going to get one more bite and you go a little bit too deep. It's not good, right? That's with a parable. You can dig too deep and get beyond what was the good point. Here, there's a fairly high ratio of story to the point that's made. It's one solid point, but there's several details in the story leading up to it. Let's sum it up. The fellow, let's put it on this side. Here's our steward. What's his problem? His job's ending. He's going to lose the stewardship. What does he do? Well, he could go out and do manual labor, right? Instead of making money by handling other people's money, he could go out there and dig ditches. Does he want to do that? No, he's doesn't sound like he's ever done that type of work, and he's not interested in getting in condition to do it. He doesn't want to do that. Well, does he want to sit out there and beg? No, that'd be embarrassing. What does he want? He wants to be sitting in the money again. How can he get there? I'm resolved what I'll do. And he calls the creditors, and what's he do with each of the creditors? He's making friends of those. He's getting in their good graces, isn't he? Is this helping his boss? His boss, out of one of them, is getting only 50 cents on a dollar, and out of the other, only 80 cents on the dollar. Is this helping the boss? This is helping the creditors, and it's helping the man. He's getting in their good graces. So what's he doing? He's using money. He's being generous with money. Is it his money? No, but he's being generous with money for what purpose? To help him be where he needs to be later. That's the point. And what he understands is the situation I'm in now is ending. It's dead end. So he's quickly being generous in ways that will be favorable to him having somewhere to be later on. Now that is the point Jesus is going to make. Look now down, let's just read those couple of verses again and then read Jesus' conclusion, see how it sits together. He's accused of wasting the goods. He's fired. He says, render the account of your stewardship. You can't be a steward anymore. He says, oh no, what am I going to do? I know. I am resolved what to do, that when I'm out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. And he calls the debtors and he whacks off their bills and settles it for a lower price. Verse 8, the Lord commends, he compliments this unrighteous steward on being so shrewd. And then Jesus said, this fella in his this wicked earthly fella in his earthly situation is understanding something that my disciples don't understand sometimes. And then Jesus says to his disciples, make to yourselves friends by means of money, mammon of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they may receive you. How does that work? Well, Matthew 25. Jesus comes and he separates people into two groups. What are the two groups? The sheep and the goats. To the sheep, he says what? Come in, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Why? Matthew 25. When you mean, why did he say that to them? He said, you can come in because you did what? Yeah. And they said, Master, when did we see you hungry and feed you? When did we see you naked and clothe you? When did we see you thirsty and clothe you? When did we see you sick and visit you? And Jesus' answer was what? When you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Come in. Then he says to the goats on the left, sorry goats, depart from me into the lake of fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Because when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me anything to drink. When I needed clothing, you didn't clothe me. When I was sick, you didn't visit me. And the goats say what? Lord, when did we not do that for you? And Jesus said what? When you didn't do it to the least of these. Now, which the sheep or the goats understood for a spiritual purpose what this steward understood at an unrighteous earthly level. This is Jesus' point. We need the steward understood what about his position? I'm not going to get to stay here. I need to be getting prepared for going somewhere else. That's what we need to understand. And a lot of people don't. When we think that the abundance of life consists of the things that we possess, when we die, how much do we get to take with us? You know, we've all heard that you've never seen a hearse with a U-Haul behind it, and that's true. The Pharaohs tried it. I mean, they built the big thing and put all their stuff in there with it, but then they rot away after a while, or at least partially, if they're mummified. But then their stuff gets taken and puts in a museum somewhere or something else. You can't take it with you. And so Jesus is saying, understand that this is ending. And understand that that money's not going to be around. So be being generous with it now so that they'll receive you into eternal tabernacles. Who's the they? For the steward, the they was these people that he helped who would then give him a job and a place to stay. Who's the they for us? Those hungry people that we feed. Those sick people that we visit. Those people needing clothing that we clothe. They are the ones that on the day of judgment, who would the Lord be talking about for us? When you're standing there, is there somebody the Lord could be thinking of when he says, when I was hungry, you fed me? Just stop and think about that. Will the Lord be able to look at you and say, when I was hungry, you did feed me. When I was sick, you did visit me. When I needed clothing, you did clothe me. If you're thinking, then guess what? You better be worried about being a goat. There's a number of things involved. on the day of judgment. And one passage doesn't cover the whole picture. He doesn't deal in that passage whether or not you believe in Christ. He doesn't deal in that passage of whether or not you've repented of your sins. Those things are important too. But the focus of that passage is what? If we haven't helped people, then what happens to us? Depart. And he'll say, because I was hungry and you wouldn't feed me. I was thirsty, you wouldn't give me drink. I was sick, you wouldn't visit me. Now, why don't we do it more? Are we too busy? Do we have the attitude of the first fellow in Luke 12, where we're so busy with our stuff that we don't have time or inclination to share any of it with anybody else? That's an important question. What does Ephesians 4 say why we should work? Look at that passage. Ephesians 4, verse 28. I want you to read that verse and see why we're supposed to work. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands that which is good. Why? That he may have whereof to give to him that hath need. And that's not the only reason we work. We also work, as Paul wrote to the Thessalonians who weren't working, work, provide for yourself so that you won't be in need and having other people need to take care of you. You work and take care of yourself. But there will be those who are less fortunate who need help. Everybody just stop for a minute. Think about your own situation, your own budget, your own finances, your own expenditures, your own time management. How much of it is about self and how much of it is about others? Let's do a little bit of self-evaluation for a minute. The man in chapter 12 whose crops came in big time, how much of it was about other people? None. How much of it was about self? All. And what is he? Destroyed. This brings us to our last parable, Luke 16. Oh, and by the way, let me say this about that one too. Look at verse in Luke 16. After Jesus says, make to yourselves friends by means of mammon of unrighteousness. In other words, be generous with money to these people so that they'll be there to be the ones that you clothed and helped and etc. Verse 10 says, he that's faithful in very little is also faithful in much. He that's unrighteous in a little is unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if therefore you haven't been faithful in unrighteous money, who will commit to your trust the true riches? If you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters. He'll either hate the one, love the other, or else he'll hold to the one, despise the other. You can't serve God and money. You can't do it. Verse 14, the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all these things and scoffed. But Jesus said, you can't serve God and money. And notice there, he's saying, if you can't be trusted with money, who's going to trust you with the bigger things? And he says, if that you can't be trusted with, which was somebody else's, who's going to give you your own? Why is what we have somebody else's? At one level, what we have is our own. What did Peter say to Ananias? While it remained, remain it not your own. But at another level, everything that we've got comes from who? God. Let me give you an illustration. You throw a party for a bunch of kids. You put food there, you're going to let them make stuff. You've got Play-Doh, clay, Lego blocks, wooden blocks. And so they're using, and they're building, they're doing stuff. But who provided the setting? Who provided the materials? Who provided everything? You did. Now, it's good for them to do stuff, but they wouldn't be doing any of that if you hadn't given it to them. And that's where we're at here. No matter what we've got, ultimately, who's the source of it? God. What would we have if we were left with only things, if you subtracted everything we've gotten from God, what would we have left? Nothing. Now, if he took his marbles and went home, the game would be over, wouldn't it? I mean, you may have gotten pretty good at marbles, but they're his marbles. And he says, if you won't show responsibility in that which is, who's going to give you more else? And he also said, he that's faithful in a little is faithful in much. This isn't the exact point here, but I'll use that principle to make another one. I had a fellow one time tell me that he was going to get rich someday, and when he got rich, he was going to give a third of what he got to the poor. You know, the best way to know whether or not somebody's going to be generous after they get rich is whether or not they're generous when they're poor. The Macedonians in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, what did Paul say about them? For the needy brethren at Jerusalem, he said, out of their deep poverty, they gave. If you're poor, you can't afford to help people a lot, right? But you can afford to help people a little bit. And we live in a society where our needy are not always needing money. Isn't that right? In fact, one of the irritating things about helping people is in our society, most of the people asking for something don't deserve it. It's irritating. One of the recent calls I got, this lady, yeah, do you give food? And I said, well, I help people sometimes. And I asked her about a situation. She said, well, and I just found out about SCAP and such. And so I said, well, SCAP gives food down here. And she said, oh, I've already got food from them, but I want some meat. They just give canned goods. I said, you got food there? You've already been given free food, and you're calling asking me for more free food? Yeah, well, you can't just eat canned goods. I started telling her about some people I've seen in some third world countries and ex-communist countries and what they got by on and stuff. And she said, all right. But there's people that have needs. And sometimes, you know what it takes? Time. Sometimes it takes visiting. Sometimes I'll give you an example. Joyce Converso. I haven't been down there to see her yet. I keep thinking about it. I think I need to get down there. Bertina said yesterday, we need to get down there and see her. I haven't got down there yet. Have you? I know some of you have. I haven't. And that's sad. I bet there's some else here that haven't. It's kind of sad too. What did Jesus say in Matthew 25? I was sick. You didn't visit me. Are we so busy with us that we don't have time for things like that? Last parable, Luke 16, we're not going to take time to develop it at length because our time's up. But just very quickly, the point that's so obvious on the surface. There was a certain rich man in verse 19. He was clothed in purple and fine linen, faring sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus. He was laid at his gate full of sores, and he desired to be fed with the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs came and licked his sores. Well, the beggar died, and Lazarus died. How many people you figure went to Lazarus' funeral? Some people believe this is a historical account of two men that actually lived. Other people take it as a parable. I don't think it makes a lot of difference. The main point is the same either way. I'm inclined to think it's an illustrative story, especially the way it starts off with, there was a certain rich man. But regardless, it illustrates a point. But whether he be an illustrative person or a literal person, would a funeral of this man get much attention? No. And the rich man dies, and people would think, wow, boy, look what he accomplished. But when they stand before God, what did God think of these two men? What did he think of the rich man? The rich man didn't get to stand in the presence of God. I mean, he'll be judged at the day of judgment. But the rich man in verse 23, he died and is buried at the end of verse 22. And in Hades, he lift up his eyes, and being in torments, he sees Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. In verse 22, the beggar died, and he was carried away by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Verse 24, the rich man in torments and flame cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. This is purposely set up to be a contrast to what? What was Lazarus wishing for before? Was he saying, I want in that house at the big dining table, and I want to sit at the chief seat, and I want, to get the breast of chicken, and no. What was Lazarus wanting? Just the crumbs. If I could just have the crumbs that fall off the table. And now things are turned around. What's the rich man wanting? Just, if he would just give me a drop of water. And what's the answer? No. He'd been unmerciful in his life. And he'd spent his life focused on me. And what did he get? That's the irony of it, isn't it? When we go through life focused on ourselves, you know what we lose? Ourselves. Somebody says, I don't want to become a Christian because I don't want to give up me. Well, you're going to lose you sooner or later. And if we will give ourselves over to God, the blessings that he bestows. When we try to hang on, we lose it. He said, son, remember that in your lifetime you received the good things. Lazarus got the evil things, but now here he's comforted and you're in anguish. Besides all this, between us and you, there's a great gulf fixed, that those that would pass from hence to you may not be able, and that none may cross over from thence to us. And then he asks, well, please send Lazarus back to my brothers. And the rich man is told they've got Moses and the prophets. If they're not going to listen to them, they're not going to listen. So he learned a lesson. What lesson did he learn? He learned how he had erred, and what did he wish? I wish my brothers wouldn't make the same mistake I made. Think of where we stand before God. Think about the fact that God has seen a lot of people like ourselves before. Have you ever thought about that? If anybody's ever told you you remind them of somebody, you probably remind God of a lot of people. There might be somebody that lived in China 800 years ago that had your exact personality, down to the T. What would it be like to be God and just watch people make stupid mistakes over and over and over and over and over? Have you ever watched, we've got a good group of young people here, but have you ever watched teenagers and teenagers in the world and just get frustrated because you see them, you see a kid and it's a little kid, the kid's so cute, and a few years later, they're smoking and got the tattoos and everything else, and you're just like, it's got to be frustrating. We just see a little bit. Think what God sees. And the message from the rich man is, don't do what I did. Let's think about the lessons from these three stories that begin with a certain rich man. If there's covetousness in your heart, get rid of it. If you're too busy about yourself, get unbusy about yourself and get busy about some other things. God's not asking us to spend all our time on other people. Our first responsibility is to provide for our own, 1 Timothy 5. Our first responsibility, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And then in financial things, we're to provide for our own. But if we busy ourselves so much with that and we start mistaking luxuries for necessities and start making our life be about what we've got, then we'll end up with nothing. Thank you for your attention. If you're subject to the invitation, won't you come as you stand and sing?